Have you ever noticed that children seem to have an endless supply of questions? Now, I don't know if it's just my kids, but they have always wanted to know everything. Where are we going? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What are we talking about? How long is it going to take? And perhaps the most famous question of all, are we there yet? And what's funny is that it doesn't seem to matter whether the trip is 10 minutes or 10 hours. At some point, that question is coming. And this got me to thinking. As much as I laugh about it when my kids do it, I've asked God many of those same questions over the years. Lord, where are you leading me? What are you doing? How much longer is this going to take? Why does it feel like nothing is happening? And if I'm being completely honest, there have been seasons when I wanted God to hand me the entire itinerary before I agreed to the trip. The problem is, though, that God doesn't usually work that way. More often than not, He gives us enough light for the next step and asks us to trust Him with the rest. Now, while that sounds simple enough, anyone who has walked through a difficult season knows that trusting God is often easier said than done. See, we live in a fast food world. We want quick answers, quick results, and quick solutions. If we can save 5 minutes, bless it, we are going to do it. If we can get something delivered instead of driving to the store, that's even better. We've become so accustomed to things happening quickly that when God asks us to wait, it can feel completely unnatural. Welcome to Making Encouragement in Chaos. I'm Susan Rayner, pastor's wife, homeschooling mom, and your friend in the middle of the mess. If this is your first time joining me, I'm so glad you're here. And if you've been listening for a while, thank you for coming back for each episode. It truly means more than you know. So today, I want to talk about something that every believer will face at some point in their walk with God. It doesn't matter how long you've lived for God, how many prayers you have seen answered, or how strong your faith may seem. Sooner or later, every one of us will find ourselves standing at a crossroads. Not a physical crossroads, but a spiritual one. It's the place where faith stops being something we talk about and becomes something that we choose. It's the place where we have to decide whether we're going to continue trusting God when we don't understand what He's doing. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about God's waiting room lately. Not because I enjoy waiting. If we're being honest, most of us don't like waiting. We like answers. We like movement. We like progress. We like knowing something is happening. Waiting feels different. Waiting feels uncertain. Waiting has a way of exposing things we didn't even realize were hiding in our hearts. And the longer I've lived for God, the more I've realized that every waiting season eventually brings us to a crossroads. And at first, we're usually full of faith and expectation. We pray, we trust, and we genuinely believe God is going to move. And then time begins to pass. The answer doesn't come when we expected, and before long, we're wrestling with questions we never thought we'd ask. Did I hear God correctly? Is He still working? Does He still remember me? Should I even keep believing? Those questions don't always come because we're weak in our faith. Sometimes they come because we're human. We can see our circumstances clearly, but we cannot always see what God is doing behind the scenes. That's where the crossroads appear. It's the place where faith becomes a choice. It's where we have to decide whether we're going to continue trusting God, even though we don't understand what He's doing. Are we going to keep believing His promises even when we haven't seen them fulfilled yet? Or are we going to allow disappointment, frustration, and doubt to slowly pull us away from what God has spoken? I think every believer finds themselves standing there at some point. The details may be different, but the decision is often the same. Will I keep trusting God when I can't see what He's doing? And a powerful passage about this very thing comes from Psalm 27. David writes, I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and He shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Oh, I love the honesty in those verses because David doesn't pretend that waiting is easy. He doesn't pretend he always understood what God was doing. He doesn't even pretend that he never struggled. Instead, he admits something that many of us have probably felt, but we may not say it out loud. I had fainted. In other words, I almost lost heart. I almost gave up. I almost stopped believing. Have you ever felt that way? Man, my hand's up and it's raised. Maybe I've felt that way not enough to walk away from God, but enough to wonder if the answer was ever going to come. Enough to question whether what you were praying for was really going to happen. Enough to feel weary. David understood that feeling, yet he also understood something else. The reason he didn't faint wasn't because he had received the answer. It wasn't because he suddenly understood everything that God was doing. It was because he chose to believe that God was still good before he saw the outcome. That, my friend, is faith. Faith isn't believing after the miracle arrives. Faith is believing while you're still waiting. And I know what it's like to stand at that crossroads because I've been there myself. Many of you know parts of my story. My husband and I waited 10 years for the promise of a child. And looking back now, I can tell that story in a few sentences. But living through it, it felt so much different. At first, I was confident. I believed God would answer. I never imagined how long the journey would actually be. As the years passed, however, I found myself facing questions I never expected. I went through physical turmoil. I went through mental turmoil. And I wondered whether I had misunderstood what God had placed in my heart. I watched time continue moving forward while the answer I was praying for seemed to remain just out of reach. Looking back now, I can honestly tell you that the hardest part wasn't the waiting itself. It was deciding what I was going to believe while I was waiting. Was I going to trust what I could see with my natural eyes? Or was I going to trust the God who had given the promise? That's where the real battle took place. The battle wasn't between me and my circumstances. The battle was over my faith. Every day I had to decide whether I was going to continue believing what God had placed in my heart or whether I was going to let the disappointment of another unanswered prayer convince me to stop hoping. That's what makes the waiting room so difficult. It isn't just the delay. It's what the delay tries to do to our faith. The enemy would love nothing more than for us to look at the length of the journey and conclude that God has forgotten us. He would love for us to allow the silence to become louder than the promises God has spoken. But I've learned something over the years. God is often doing His greatest work in the seasons when we think nothing is happening at all. One of my favorite verses hangs on the wall in my kitchen. I have a lot of favorite verses, but there's a few that really stand out more than any, and this is one of them. I have it hanging there in my kitchen so that I can see it every day. Hebrews 11:1, it says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." I've looked at those words countless times over the years, especially during seasons when I couldn't see what God was doing. Faith isn't believing after the answer arrives. Faith is choosing to trust God before it comes. Faith is believing that God is still working even when we can't see the evidence with our natural eyes. The crossroads is where that faith is tested. It's where we decide whether we're going to walk by faith or by sight. It's where we decide whether we're going to trust God's character when we can't trace His hand. I wish I could tell you that once you make that choice, you'll never have to make it again. But the truth is that faith is often a daily decision. Sometimes it's a decision we make over and over again as we continue bringing our questions, fears, and uncertainties back to God. The good news, though, is that God is faithful even when the road feels long. Maybe you're standing at a crossroads today. Maybe you're waiting on an answer. Maybe you're praying about something that hasn't changed. Maybe you're wondering if God is still working behind the scenes. And if that's you, I want to encourage you with the same words David wrote so many years ago. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and He shall strengthen thy heart. Don't allow what you can't see to convince you that God isn't working. Don't allow the length of the journey to cause you to forget His faithfulness. And don't make a permanent decision based on a temporary season. Keep trusting, keep believing, and keep looking to Jesus. Next time, we're going to talk about what we do while we're waiting and how staying at the feet of Jesus can strengthen our faith when the waiting gets heavy. So if this encouraged you today, I'd love for you to share it with a friend who may need it. And if you'd like more encouragement throughout the week, be sure to visit makeitmakin.com or join our weekly Stay Rooted email community. I send out an email every Wednesday, midweek encouragement, straight to your inbox. I've linked everything in the show notes below. I pray that this has touched you today, and I want you to remember that I'm always praying for you, even if I don't know who you are. God bless.